Hi, welcome to Wessex Archaeology. Here at Wessex Archaeology, we're an educational charity aiming to enhance the public's knowledge of science, the arts, heritage and culture through using archaeology. Our second function is a commercial archaeology company or rescue archaeology. The profits from this fund our charitable programme. Lastly, we also hold a nationally significant archaeological archive. Our community engagement programme delivers the charitable aim through our schools programme, STEM events, site visits and much more. Here in our offices, we have spaces for closed school and other group activities, as well as behind-the-scenes tours and talks with our experts.
Hello, I'm Sam Fieldhouse, Education and Community Manager at Wessex Archaeology. First became involved with the Sandford Award back in 2011 when I was a fresh-faced museum learning officer at Chichester District Museum. That was the first time a programme I'd worked on had won the Sandford Award. And I'm very proud that 9 years later, I'm ready for us to submit the Wessex Archaeology Learning Programme for appraisal by the Sandford team.
Hello, I'm Natasha and I'm one of the Community Engagement Coordinators for Wessex Archaeology. I'm based in the Sheffield office and I look after community engagement for the north of the UK. My background is in gallery education. I take a creative approach to engaging audiences, and this has been particularly useful in adapting our programme for online delivery. Because of our flexible and adaptive approach, we've been able to continue delivering sessions throughout the last year. We include interactive elements in all of our sessions. We've now delivered these sessions for many groups, including school groups, young archaeology clubs, brownies and scouts.
Hi, I'm Beth Harrison, Community Engagement Coordinator for Wessex Archaeology. I lead our event programme in the south, where we take our experts to where the audiences are and pop up and surprise people with archaeology. I particularly work with our growing team of STEM ambassadors and help empower them to share their passion for science within archaeology with all our audiences.
With my colleagues Beth and Natasha, we deliver a programme in schools and online. And in the last year, with the COVID crisis, it's been online. We've had a really steep learning curve. But we feel that we've been able to deliver valuable, meaningful learning despite all the challenges of delivering online. Of course, we can't wait to get back into the classroom and to deliver in person so we can physically share our enthusiasm with young people. The Wessex Archaeology Learning Programme aims to help young people understand that archaeology is not just about digging. Archaeology has so much more it can offer to help people learn new skills and, importantly, to use archaeology as a creative stimulus for learning across the curriculum. We like to use archaeology to stimulate science, engineering and technical learning, arts learning and of course literacy. We find that young people are so imaginative and so stimulated by the artefacts when they use them. They bring the archaeology to life. We don't believe in telling young people what things are, we let them explore it for themselves. Welcome to our wartime operations room. Our building was the 1940s headquarters of the RAF at RAF Old Sarum. In this space, during the war, the RAF would have tracked the movement of enemy aircraft around British coasts, looking for the first sight of German aircraft. They'd have had big maps laid out so they could move miniature aeroplanes over different parts of the country to see where an attack was likely to be. Nowadays, it's a multi-purpose space, currently used as office space, but with its waterproof floor and ability to have everything cleared away, we can turn this into a large event space or a messy space or a workroom, whatever we need it to be.
Here we have our finds room, where visitors can learn more about the process of archaeology post-excavation. This is one of the highlights of our behind-the-scenes tour, with specialists working on many different kinds of artefacts in one room. Artefacts are brought here from sites all across the country to be washed, marked, sorted, and then analysed by our specialists. We have experts in everything from pottery to metal to even animal bone and human bone. From here, artefacts are then sent on to archives, museums, or kept here on site to be used within our community engagement handling collection. We also have our reference collection of animal skeletons, which can then be used in any of our hands-on community engagement activities.
Despite being a building built predominantly in the 1930s, Wessex Archaeology's Portway House has facilities for people of all needs. We have a gender-neutral and accessible toilet, as well as individual male and female toilets. To make teachers feel extra welcome when they're working with Wessex Archaeology, we always make them a welcoming cup of tea or coffee in our kitchen. We even provide decaf. Our digital conference room is available for small groups and provides an intimate and enclosed space where we can deliver lectures, talks, or smaller, more intimate sessions for SEND groups that might need a peaceful, quiet space isolated from the rest of the building. We're very lucky at Wessex Archaeology to have a small garden available for our use. It's a great place to set up our event space, our tent, for children to have a go at getting hands-on with archaeology. The garden is also a pleasant space away from traffic and away from the road, where SEND groups can work quietly on art projects, or children can have a go at getting hands-on with archaeology.
Here we have the Environmental Archaeology department. So here we learn a little bit more about the landscape of the site, and we can use this to explain the process of climate change, of landscape change, and the processes that happen within that. So what happens here is out on site, they'll take lots and lots of soil samples. So loads of buckets turn up here, they'll then be washed through the flotation tanks. This means that anything just like general mud gets washed away, and we're left with potential archaeology, such as stones, bones, even tiny glass beads sometimes. Everything like that floats to the top, gets cleaned off, and then put in very low temperature ovens to dry off. After this, everything's sieved, sorted, and then it goes to the specialist. So here we can learn a little bit more about how the landscape of the site has changed over time. So for example, we can figure out from plant remains what plants were there, if they were crops that were being grown or wild plants. We can have a look at any bone materials found to figure out what animals were there, if they were farming or wild again. We can also figure out how the landscape has changed over time. So for example, information gained from environmental archaeology combined with geoarchaeology can tell us more about if the landscape has changed from a coastal site to an inland site, if there was a woodland there that was then knocked down and turned into crops, anything like that, here is where we figure it out. Here we can connect science with archaeology as well, through looking at the wildlife and the habitats. We can also look at art through environmental archaeology. So all of the information that we find out about the site from here, for example, the type of trees, the species of animals that are around, can all contribute to our understanding of the site, and therefore goes into our artistic reconstructions. So if you see one of our reconstructions, all of the plants and animals that might be in the background are from the actual evidence that we have found on site.
At Wessex Archaeology, part of our charitable aim is to use archaeology as an exciting cross-curricular stimulus for teaching and learning. And one of the things we're very keen to help young people, especially GCSE and A-level students, understand is how a career in the arts can be relevant to a career in archaeology. We're very lucky at Wessex Archaeology to have an in-house 3D printing team. And our 3D printing team produce objects, replicas, to use in our loan boxes and school sessions. Here's one we made earlier. This is a 3D printed skull. This is from the 19th century, so it's really useful for teaching the Victorian period. This poor fellow had had the top of his head cut off. We think to explore what made this person perhaps a villain. Was there something wrong with his brain, maybe? The Stone Age to Iron Age sessions we run are very popular, and we support those with some 3D prints from sites around the UK. We can't always take artefacts from the archaeology collection out to schools, so being able to 3D print them is a really good way to bring hands-on tactile learning to young people in schools. This particular example is a small knife from the grave of a very important man down in Devon. And something we're very keen to talk about with young people when we use these objects is materials. So although we're starting with arts learning, we also bring in science learning. And we think about what materials things are made of then, and what materials things are made of now. With the inclusion of the Anglo-Saxons in the new 2013 revisions to the primary curriculum, we've been able to produce some really interesting Anglo-Saxon 3D prints. And this particular one, it's a bit of a mystery. When we go into schools, we don't tell children things. We don't act as the sage upon the stage, the all-knowing. We like them to work things out for themselves. And this is one of those artifacts we let them have a look at and see if they can work it out. So it's a very unusual item. It's very precious, very special, and it was found in the grave of a woman, an Anglo-Saxon woman living in Wiltshire. Along with this interesting box was a shell that only comes from Africa or the Middle East. So the question we asked children is, what was a woman in Wiltshire doing with a shell from Africa or the Middle East? How did it get here and why was she buried with it? The box also has some interesting shapes on it. So we encourage young people to look really closely, to handle it and feel it, and to see if they can work out what these shapes are. Something I really love about using 3D prints as part of our learning programme is how tactile they are. And let's face it, they're pretty much indestructible, and we can replace them, unlike actual archaeology. I love that this item reproduces not only the look of something that's 1,000 years old, but also the sound and the feel, and because of that metallic material it's made of, even the smell of the real thing that existed 1,000 years ago. We're shooting this section in our photography studio, and we're very lucky to have a photography team who support us with producing digital content. And during the COVID crisis, being able to produce digital content and deliver digitally to schools has been really, really valuable. But again, we call on the digital skills of our photography and videography team to encourage young people to pursue careers in the arts. If people are interested in photography and videography, we like to show that there are careers within the archaeological and heritage sectors where we rely on the skills of competent videographers, photographers and artists to support the interpretation of archaeology.
Here are two of our more open-ended activities that we use at events. This one over here we use more for STEM events to explore science and archaeology. So it's based on geoarchaeology, which explores changes in the landscape. So we base our activity off borehole cores. So this is when we drill down into the ground, and then when we pull the drill out, we get a core of the earth. So through this we can see how the deposits change over time, and through that we can figure out kind of where we're more likely to find archaeology. We might also find archaeology in the cores themselves as well. So what we do is we have these test tubes which act as our kind of container for the core. We will then put a few marshmallows in the bottom. These act as our kind of big rocks at the bottom, or the bedrock. So we put a few of those in. So that's our first layer, so it kind of matches up with what you can see here. The second layer is chocolate drops. So these are kind of either smaller rocks to go on top of the bedrock, or we also, depending on the level of the students, we say that this is clay. So clay is quite important in archaeology because we often find more archaeology in a layer of clay because it's anaerobic. It protects the artifacts a bit better. So we can start talking about kind of different environments that archaeology tends to be found in, what's better for it, kind of wet, dry, anaerobic, as I said, or kind of anything like that. So we can start to explore preservation, and this is also kind of explaining stratigraphy as well. So we can explain the layers in the ground through using sweets, through using marshmallows and chocolate. And then on top of the second layer of the chocolate, we then have sherbet. So this acts as our sand, silt, anything like that. Or we also use this opportunity to teach the word alluvium, which is any kind of fine deposits that are dropped by water. So using things like alluvium that's present in the ground and other layers, we can start to figure out if there was maybe a river in the area, if it was a woodland, if it was a coast at one point. And through that, we can start to understand where we're more likely to find archaeology. So if there's a river, we're probably going to find archaeology either side of it because people settle near rivers because it's a fresh water source. So there's a lot you can kind of learn just through using the layers here. So this is the end product, and they can take this away with them. If you compare it to our core here, you can see it looks quite similar. So we have a selection of loan boxes that we can lend out to schools and take to events. Each of them focuses on a different time period. So for example, we've got Stone Age to Iron Age, Roman, Medieval. This one's our Stone Age to Iron Age, so I'll just show you some of the things that we have in them. So each one comes with items that the students can dress up in. We also have some sheepskin in this one as well. All of them also come with information cards and relevant books as well. So for example, this one has a little book about the Amesbury Archer, and then we also have one about Stone Age mystery, which is a children's book. Each of the loan boxes comes with both genuine and replica artefacts, just depending on what we have available, the type of material that it's made from as well. We use the loan boxes to explore archaeology and history, but also as a starting point to explore other areas of the curriculum. So for example, we can use the different materials to explore science, what things are made of. So we've got flint, bone and pottery in there. We can also use it as a starting point to explore art. So for example, how pottery is made, the types of decorations that they put on there, what they would have used to create the decorations. And we can also use it for things like a starting point for creative writing to explore what life was like at the time. So we'll just have a look at a couple of things that are in here. So in this one in particular, as I said, it's Stone Age to Iron Age. So we've got some animal skulls in here, just to show kind of which animals were important at the time. And because it covers quite a large period of time, it's important to explore the idea of kind of going from a hunter-gatherer kind of society where they were hunting sheep and wild animals to a more settled society later on where they were kind of herding animals, and they might have kind of had domesticated sheep. So that's what we use the animal bone to explore. We also have some other animal bones that are butchered. So on these, it shows evidence of kind of knife marks and things like that, so where they would have cut the animals up to eat them. We also have a dog skeleton as well, so we can start to talk about the domestication of dogs, and we can also use it to compare kind of sizes, shapes, between the dog skeleton and the sheep as well. So you can explore how we can figure out what animal the skeleton belongs to as well. So with it being Stone Age to Iron Age, we also have some flint objects in here as well. So this is a hand axe. This is a replica, but it still shows all of the things that a genuine artifact would. You can still see how it was made with all the flakes coming off it, and the cortex on the outside. It really kind of adds to the experience being able to hold the artifact, kind of hold it, how heavy it is, how they would have held it and how it would have worked. So we also have some smaller items as well. So for example, we have this arrowhead. So we can start to see the skill that was involved in making these tools. So making an arrowhead, it has to be a certain kind of size, weight, shape to make sure that it would shoot properly. So you can really kind of see the skill that went into making this. Each box also comes with environmental evidence. So environmental archaeology is quite a big part of what we explore. So for example, in here we have small snail shells, little bits of charcoal and bone. So particularly the snail shells can tell us about how the landscape was at the time. So for example, if it was a woodland, if there was a river, anything like that, we can start to explore how the landscape changed over time using this evidence. So in this box, we also have some pottery. So you can see the kind of changes over time in what they were making, how they were decorating it, the materials they were using. So here we have a little bit of the pottery, so you can see any kind of materials that they included within the clay to kind of give it different properties. And we can start to explore the changes over time with the kind of materials that they were making, how refined it was, any decorations and what they were using to decorate as well, you can see over time. This is our second activity that we use at events. So we use this one often at agricultural fairs that we go to. It's based on environmental archaeology. So environmental archaeology explores kind of the smaller things that we might miss on excavations. So it could be things like seeds, snail shells, very small bits of bone, fish bone, things like that. So what we do is we have the magnifying glass here, so you can look through that. And we have to search through. So we've got little bits of chalk, which is what we're not interested in. And we have to find the archaeology within the chalk. So we have things like bits of flint. So this can tell us if we find worked bits of flint, so it can tell us that people were making tools out of it. And if it's burnt as well, then it could be that they were kind of exploring fire with flint. and heating things up for cooking and things like that. We also have small beads. So these are modern plastic beads that we use because often, particularly if it's in a ploughed field, then the modern items can get mixed up with the archaeology. So we have to know which is archaeology and what isn't. So we also have things like charred seeds. So these are preserved because they're charred. So if a seed is just in the ground, it'll decompose and we wouldn't find it. If it's charred, however, this is a method of preservation, so we're more likely to find them. And the charring tells us that it was something that might have been cooked so that people were eating it, but it can also tell us more about their diet. So were they eating certain types of grains? Were they eating small animals like fish, like I was saying, because we often find charred bone as well. And it kind of builds a better picture of what life was like at the time. Through these two activities, we can explore more about the different areas of archaeology and start to learn more about how the landscape changes over time.
Wessex Archaeology has been absolutely amazing in bringing the topics that the children do in their curriculum to life, giving children the opportunities to handle artefacts, to understand the past through first-hand experience, not through the interactive whiteboard, but also with archaeologists coming in. And I think one of the things we believe really strongly is that we need to get children to go out into the world and experience the world rather than being in isolation in school. And if we can't go out all the time, to get the real world in and work with us. So I think that's something that has been hugely successful. We arrived on this site in September, brand new school, and we've seen houses opposite sort of growing since then on a daily basis. And I think what's really important with the work that the children have done looking at their local area is to be able to see that although we think we're new and the first people who have appeared here on the plain, but actually there have been people living here for very many years. And I think giving children the opportunity to be able to look back in time and see our ancestors really and why they first came here and what their lives were like, and investigate their sort of families and setup and jobs and roles actually is really important in giving those children a sense of their place in time.
So the first thing that Wessex Archaeology did with our school was bring a load of artefacts that have been found in our site, our school site. It really made the history come to life for the children. They were able to handle the artefacts, really understand what had happened in our school site before they were here, before our building was here. The artefacts also really inspired the children to really understand exactly what had been going on in the past. So they were really able to connect with the people from the past who had the item before them. So for example, we've been learning about World War I, and they found de-icing powder, which was great for the children. They really loved that. So they were able to then think about who had it, why did they have it, what was life like, how did those soldiers feel having to de-ice themselves in the middle of the trenches. So it was just absolutely inspiring. And the writing outcomes that we've had from that has been outstanding.
Why do you like Wessex Archaeology visiting our school?
Because that means they teach us new things that we never knew before.
Okay. And what do you know about the Stone Age?
I know that they invented lots of things, like they invented beds, because they made beds, although their beds weren't very comfy.
What were they made out of?
Like wood. And that they were clever, and that they were farmers, and that they always hunted things because they didn't have any shops.
Year 3-4 children were looking at World War I last year, and I think they had an opportunity to really investigate the people who had been training on the land literally outside, to handle artefacts and things that had been dug up, and to actually experience the food that they would have eaten, whether it was camp coffee or sardines. They were making Anzac biscuits, and I think every single possible part of life was reflected in the work that they did, and it brought it absolutely alive, which is, I think, important, that they're learning from real experiences rather than reading about it in a book. I don't know how you'd really explain an Anzac biscuit unless you try it. You know, it's those sorts of things, handling guns, looking at the tins, the billy cans, all those sorts of things. And then to be able to have those displayed in our school has been fantastic. So the aim is that children will become the curators of their own museums, and I think that's something that you can only get by working with experts in the field, which they have had the pleasure of being able to do. So children have had the experience of working with archaeologists, working with the scientific team, working with volunteers, also working with the artists who've been working on the etchings that we've got on our windows, and also today obviously having people in filming and the drone flying over as well. So they've opened up to a wealth of different opportunities that a setup like Wessex Archaeology can provide with careers in the future.
The children have absolutely thoroughly enjoyed this year. The feedback I have from my class is just, they just can't wait. Every time I mention Wessex Archaeology, they're like, hey, what are we doing next? So they absolutely have loved it. I've had feedback from parents as well. One child in particular in my class that is often quite tricky to engage. His parents have told me that he now has a passion for archaeology, and he's been around his village looking for different things, and it's just been absolutely wonderful to see.
I'd like to talk a little bit about evaluation. And this year, for the first time, we've started working with some freelance evaluators to help us better evaluate our programmes so we can improve them. We always ask teachers what we can do better next time, but we wanted to implement a proper evaluation framework to better understand how we work. So we've been working with two evaluators, Nikki Boyd and Anne Nicol, and they are helping us understand what evaluation really is and how we can make it meaningful and quantifiable and build that in to improving our programme in the future. We're very lucky at Wessex Archaeology to have a hugely supportive team of people who provide us with their expert knowledge so that we as educators can use their knowledge to enhance the learning of young people. Before we start engaging with people, we put in place a pedagogy, a theory that we wanted to make ourselves stand by. And we have 4 points of our pedagogy, 4 pillars, to help us make sure that we're always doing the right thing. Because we can't always ask our students and our children if we're doing the right thing. Sometimes it's not convenient or it's just not possible. So we want to put in place 4 pillars that we can abide by, that hold us to account. So before we start any form of learning activity, we make sure that we have a specific aim, a very clear learning aim that we want to achieve from that session. And we differentiate that between all children learning something, most children learning something, and some children learning something, so that we have a differentiated learning outcome for each of those groups. We ensure that we deliver in an intermodal style, being visual, using props, using sensory interaction wherever we can. We've done some tasting and some smelling with children, and it goes down really well. We want to make sure that we work within a specific time frame, making sure that we're not boring people or talking for too long, but talking for enough time that we can get our message across. And in an environment that enables and encourages learning, enabling learning to take place. And that doesn't have to be a classroom environment, it's a metaphysical environment. It's encouraging people to be in the right place mentally to receive a message, to be ready to learn. And finally, we like to make sure that we have the right people delivering to the right people. We make sure that the people who are delivering are within the sphere of influence of the people they're talking to. A really good example of sphere of influence in practice is how we use our STEM ambassadors. Now, most of our STEM ambassadors are young women working here at Wessex, young women having a career in archaeology. So we send our STEM ambassadors out to schools to be positive role models for young women in schools and colleges around the area.
We want to help people today connect with people in the past. Archaeology is about lives, not just about the objects.
The Wessex Archaeology Learning Programme has been in development for 3 years, and we finally feel ready to present it to the Sandford team for your appraisal. It would be really exciting to have the Sandford Award. It would be a real pinnacle for everything we feel that we've achieved. And we will use the Sandford Award to hold us to account, to ensure that in the future we continue to deliver quality learning for all the young people we work with.